minor technical issue there. We left off with the Nocturne. So I'm gonna post a link to the Nocturne in E flat major. It's a piece of music that you've all heard. It's been used in background in many, many movies and TV shows. So many of you will probably recognize it. The last piece of Chopin, the next piece of Chopin, is his Etude in C minor, which has been nicknamed the Revolutionary Etude. So an etude literally translates from the French as study piece. So what that means is, it's a piece of music that if you practice it, you get better at something. It could be a rhythmic etude that helps you get more precise in your rhythms. It could be a scale etude that makes you better at playing certain patterns. But one thing all etudes tend to have in common is that they're fairly boring. Most people aren't going to want to listen to you play an etude. It's kind of like watching a football player do footwork drills or something like that. It makes them better at playing in the games, but it's really not that interesting for anyone to watch. But some etudes are a very high level of musical content, are great music to listen to, and they also have the added bonus of making you a better performer. And those are called concert etudes. Chopin's Etude in C minor is one of those. Now, it's called the Revolutionary Etude. The revolutionary part of it is that, remember, Chopin was Polish. He was a Polish nationalist. He loved his homeland. And Russia had just invaded Poland and captured Warsaw, the capital of Poland. And this made Chopin very angry. But here he was. He was a frail man living in Paris. Couldn't really do anything about it. So he poured his emotions into composing for the piano. The Revolutionary Etude is a very fast, fiery, angry piece of music. The etude part of it is, well, if you think about it, when you sit at a piano, the melody is always played by the right hand on the higher notes, and the left hand tends to play accompaniment parts. So usually the piano player gets more technique, can play faster with the right hand than the left hand. In this particular etude, the left hand does all of the fast playing. The left hand is playing really rapid scales and patterns for most of the piece. So by studying this and mastering this, you develop much, much greater technique on the low half of the keyboard with the left hand. And it's also great music, so it's a concert etude, and I'll provide a link to that. It's really an amazing piece of music. The third of these great piano composers that we're going to talk about is Franz Liszt. Now, Robert Schumann, Frederick Chopin, and Franz Liszt were all born within 1 year of each other. Schumann in Germany, Chopin in Poland, and Liszt in Hungary. All three of them were the sons of middle-class people. They didn't come from families of musicians. In this case, Liszt, his father, was an administrator who worked for a wealthy noble family in Hungary. Liszt went to Vienna, where he met Beethoven and he met Schubert, and he set out to become the world's greatest piano player. He was inspired by a violin player named Paganini, Niccolo Paganini. Paganini was the world's greatest violinist, may have been the greatest violinist in history relative to the people around him. Paganini wrote a lot of his own music. He wrote music that he was the only person that could play at the time. And he was also a great showman who had amazing stage presence and was always in the newspapers. Liszt was very inspired by Paganini and wanted to become the Paganini of the piano, as he said. So he practiced and became a great player. He also developed a stage persona, and he became, today we would think of him as being a rock star. He was famous all over Europe. He was a famous womanizer who had women waiting for him in every city. He never got lonely, as they say. But he was also an amazing performer relative to the people around him at the time. He may have been the greatest piano player who has ever lived. He did that until he was in his mid-30s. At 36, he quit touring and performing and committed himself to being a composer and a conductor. And he did that for a number of years. And then he quit those positions and moved to Rome and studied religion, Catholicism, and took holy vows. So Liszt became a priest. The comparison today is, think of a incredibly famous popular music performer, like let's say, Beyonce. And let's say Beyonce quit performing and became a nun. That's the kind of impact it had on society in Europe at the time, that this incredibly famous musician and famous womanizer had become a a priest. As a composer, his music was very ahead of its time. He really foreshadowed a lot of things that were going to come later, which meant people thought he was crazy. Some people just thought Liszt's music was over the top, loud, bombastic, didn't make any sense. Turns out that he was just ahead of everyone else in the music he was thinking of. He created, in addition to piano music, he wrote orchestra music, and he actually created a whole new genre, which is called the symphonic poem. He preferred the term tone poem, actually, but we usually call it symphonic poem. This is a one-movement piece for instrumental ensemble, usually 10, 15 minutes long. Some of them are longer than that, some of them are a little shorter. And they're program music. So a tone poem or symphonic poem is about something. And the name usually clues you into what it is. Some very famous symphonic poems are the Moldau by the composer Smetana, which is about a river that flows through Bohemia. Death and Transfiguration by Strauss is kind of the thoughts of a man as he lays dying on his bed. It's a very serious, introspective tone poem. Ein Heldenleben, A Hero's Life, also by Strauss, which actually was autobiographical because Strauss was incredibly egotistical. But if you've ever played in a concert band, I know some of you in the class have played in a concert band, chances are you've played a symphonic poem. I've conducted many symphonic poems for band that have titles that tell you what they are. I conducted a piece called Trail of Tears, which was about the forced march of Native Americans from Southeast to the Midwest, to Oklahoma, forced march by the government in the 1830s, where many of them died. It's a horrible part of American history. I conducted a piece called The Maelstrom, which is supposed to sound like this giant whirlpool. That piece I conducted for a junior high honor band. So if you've played in a concert band, or ever gone to a concert band concert, chances are you've heard a symphonic poem. I'm going to provide a link to Liszt's piano pieces Transcendental Etude number 10, which is, it's amazing music. It really is ahead of the other music. When you listen to the Chopin pieces, listen to the Schumann pieces, this is very different. It really resembles music that came along after those composers in some ways. Also, it's technically incredibly difficult because Liszt wrote it to perform himself. So that's going to end the second lecture from part 5, the Romantic Era. This has been broken into 2 videos because of a technical glitch. I will continue with the third lecture in part 5, which we're going to start with chapter 10.